If you get a RIF separation email, there's certain decisions you need to make and programs that are available to you. We want you to know your options and be prepared so you can get back on your feet even quicker. In this episode, we're going to talk about options surrounding retirement, some of the available programs for you if a RIF happens to you, and then we're also going to talk about the critical action items you should start doing now. Welcome. I'm Ed Smith, President of Valor Wealth Partners, where we're dedicated to educating federal employees on your complex and often underutilized benefits. We're going to continue the conversation that we started with the plan according to DOGE. And with this, we really want to start talking about RIFs and what is going to happen here. Now, with a RIF, there's basically three options that may happen to you in the coming months. One is an email that's saying you're now separated from federal service. You might be downgraded or transferred, which is a second option, or business as usual. You actually aren't affected directly by the RIF, except you probably will have a higher workload and there might be more tasks that you're going to be able to do. So either separation, a downgrade or transfer, or you stay in that current role that you're already in. Now, with whatever happens, we know that there's just a lot of confusion and a lot of things that are going on. We know there's a lot of people having a lot of questions and concerns. One of the big ones that we've heard a lot about, is it legal? Is the RIF even legal? Well, you have to go on the assumption that it is, and that's one of the things that we want to be able to look at. Through looking through all of the documents, one of the things that I found that was interesting was that if a continuing resolution is not extended on March 14th, and we actually have a shutdown for 30 days, a RIF would be an automatic scenario. So while people may say it might not be legal now, there could be a scenario if the government is shut down for more than 30 days that a RIF automatically goes into effect. So there are some other unique factors that you have to be able to look at with a RIF. So today we're going to focus on what happens if you get a separation email, or the things that you should be considering now in preparation, just in case one of those things hit your inbox. So we want to be able to look at those and make sure we're addressing them. Now, when we look at the first section, we want to be able to look at the qualifications for retirement, because this is actually going to put you probably in the best scenario that you possibly can be in. It's not great. Again, getting a RIF is never good, when the choice is taken away from you. But if you have the option of an immediate retirement or some type of retirement in the near future, this could be a helpful scenario that's going to be better than what a lot of other people that don't have this option is there. So let's talk about this. Before we get into some of the specific qualifications, let's look at some of the other big generalities that I want to make sure are addressing. There are just way too many details and scenarios to be able to address everything. So we're going to try to talk about the most common ones, and we'll try to be able to address them. If you need or want me to go into a little bit more detail, please let me know. We can try to create more videos as time permits down the road, but probably not in the next week. But we can try to get some more specifics on these different types of things. Now, as far as I know, there's over 10 types of retirements that are available for federal employees. Most people don't know about most of them, but there are over 10 types of retirements, and sometimes there's even more with some type of scenarios that come up. Okay. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about is there's the special category employees. This could be law enforcement, air traffic controllers, firefighters. They have a unique situation with their 20 years on trying to be able to get that. We're not going to get into that complexity today, but obviously this is something that is very important, of trying to be able to make sure you're earning that the SCE retirement. So just look at the generalities of qualifying for retirement. We'd have to dig a little bit more into making sure you're qualifying for the SCE retirement and make sure you get there. All right. I also want to talk about something big on retirement qualification or eligibility. We're going to be talking about the years of service and the age. And generally, those two criteria are the big factors on if you're eligible to retire. One of the questions that we get a lot, can I use my sick leave to be eligible to retire? And the answer is no. Your sick leave will add to your annuity payments, but it will not add to the eligibility. So you're going to have to hit the years of service and the age for the different requirements that we're going to be talking about. Now, in one unique caveat with a RIF, when you're involuntarily separated, annual leave can be used for eligibility if the annual leave that you already have on the books will bring you to the eligibility using the RIF date that you receive. So basically, if you needed 2 more weeks to hit eligibility and you had that in the books and you had a month of annual leave, that would get you to eligibility. So there is a little bit of wiggle room there, but it's really not too much on that side. So I just want you to be a little bit aware of some of these big things. All right, let's get into some of the categories of retirement. The best scenario by far is an immediate eligibility with no loss in benefits. And when I'm talking about benefits, I'm talking about FEHB, dental, those different types of benefits. I'm not talking about all of the benefits you have as a federal employee, just the basic ones that are required or generally follow you into retirement. Okay, CSRS or CSRS, you most likely would qualify unless you had a big break in service because of the time frame of how long that is there. So we're really going to be looking at the FERS type of scenarios for most of these people when we're talking about these scenarios. Okay, so again, not trying to get all of the specifics here. We'd have a very, very long video. All right, there's 3 basic levels for immediate eligibility with no loss in the benefit. You have 5 years of service and you're age 62. You have 20 years of service and you're age 60. Or you have 30 years of service and you've hit your minimum retirement age, or MRA. All right, so those are the 3 best scenarios that could possibly happen, because at that point, you can leave at any point. The ball is in your court. Even if you don't get a RIF, you can say, you know what, I'm going to stick around here, or you say, you know what, this is just getting too crazy, I want to walk away. So you really have a lot of control in here because you have the ability to immediately retire, and you wouldn't lose things like your FEHB or your FEGLI. So some really good things on that side. The next category we want to talk about is the immediately eligible to retire, but you could either lose your benefits for a short period of time, or you would have a reduction in your annuity payments. And those generally come in with a minimum retirement age less than 30 years. So a 10 years of service or 20 years of service. The reason why we separate them out, even more often than not, it's just called MRA plus 10, is because with 10 or 20 years of service, there is different criteria for when you can get your benefits back and with those different periods of time. So we're not going to get into the specifics, but just knowing that minimum retirement age 10, there is also a minimum retirement age with 20 years of service, and then obviously 30, you get to keep both. So that's something to be able to look at. There's also something that is with a RIF that comes into play is the discontinued service retirement. All right, now this is immediately eligible if you qualify with no loss in benefits. So a discontinued service retirement is an involuntary action, such as in a RIF. They have the same qualifications generally as a VERA, but the VERA is a voluntary. So you actually might still qualify under a VERA. There are some agencies that have it extended into March. Again, all different agencies have different things. So there is some complexity. So while I am talking about generalities, some agencies may have a little bit of spin on different things or uniqueness to their RIF or something like that. All right. With the discontinued service, the service and age requirements are 20 years of service at age 50, or 25 years of service at any age. So those are pretty nice. So if you're like, well, I haven't hit my minimum retirement age and I have 23 years of service, say you're 52, you could actually do a discontinued service retirement if you have get that RIF, or there's a scenario where you might possibly have that VERA. Now, on top of the age and service requirements, there's other 2 criteria that you have to meet for the eligibility to get the discontinued service. One, you're reached for an involuntary action, so basically reach out for that, and you have not received an offer from another position at or within 2 grades below your present position in the same local commuting area. So basically, you weren't offered a job in the same type of same agency or same area within 2 pay grades, and so or 2 grades below. So this is something that you have to be able to look at. We're going to talk a little bit more about if you should accept or not in a different video, but I just want to be able to look at that eligibility for this. A discontinued service retirement is something that can really help you meet some eligibility or not be in a situation that's bad. Now, again, it's never good when it's out of your control and you are being forced to retire or forced to leave federal service. I would say that if you're not quite in your 60s yet and you don't want to, are you going to call it retirement, or is it just going to be a change of jobs or something like that? But at least you'll be getting income in those different scenarios, which could be very good compared to a lot more people that are out there in the corporate world that don't get a lot of these benefits. So at least you have something that's there. I'm not saying it's great, but it's better than the alternative of other people. Now, if none of these applies, let's look at a couple different scenarios. If none of these apply, you might be looking at a deferred retirement when you achieve the age and service requirements. So again, there's a lot of different age and service requirements. When you hit them, you might be able to get a deferred retirement at those levels. All right. Obviously, if no other bad criteria is there, you should be able to do that. You would have no benefit if you're not qualified. So if you're under 5 years of service and you don't qualify for a federal pension, then you're not going to be able to get something when you hit those age in service because you're actually not going to hit those service requirements. Okay. Now, only you can decide if you want to rejoin the federal service in the future. If you do, you might be able to take the service that you've already had and then add to it when you get back into the federal service. Now, we know there's a hiring freeze, but we know there's a potential for other people coming back into the federal government. We talked about this in the last video of, hiring one person for every 4 people that were let go is the restrictions that are most likely going to be put on a lot of agencies. So there is an option for this, but it also might be down the road. You could also go into private sector for a while and then come back to federal service at some point in the future. So there's just a lot of options here, and there's too many scenarios, like I said, to be able to say exactly this is what should be happening. So one of the things I highly recommend is talk to HR, get a report on your retirement benefits, know where you stand, get your documents to make sure you understand, get a certified copy of federal service, 3107. Just know where you are and what your benefits are. These are very important to know what you're going to qualify and what you're not going to qualify for. So these are just some things you want to be able to do and make sure that you're very well prepared if retirement is even close, or one of those options where you want to make sure you're documenting for some point in the future. Okay. Another thing that we want to talk about, and we're going to have a whole video on this because I think it's a very big topic, and I've been getting text messages today asking me if I could help them out with something on this different scenario for people. And this is severance pay eligibility. Okay. Now, severance pay eligibility is available if you're separated from a permanent position involuntarily and through no fault of your own. You will likely be eligible for severance pay. All right. So again, severance pay can come in, but there are some very unique characteristics. There's actually 3 big criteria to make sure that you're eligible for that. And some of these 3 actually have subparts of the 3. So it gets very confusing very quickly. All right. To be eligible, you must not have refused an offer of a position that is 1, in the same commuting area, 2, in the same agency, and 3, no more than 2 grades below your current grade level. So we already talked about that before, about the discontinued service. So you have that option here, or then you could go in that discontinued service, right? The next big criteria is, in addition, you must have been employed for at least 12 continuous months and cannot be eligible for an immediate annuity through either the civilian federal service or the uniform federal service. So you can't be eligible for an immediate annuity through either one of those 2 options, all right? That's the way it's written. Again, it could be confusing because you might have already be receiving a pension from the uniform service. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to fall. If they say, well, you meet this one so you're not going to have this the way it's written, is if you're eligible for either. That's not. It's not saying either from the one that you're currently serving in. So a little bit of discretion of where that is or clarification could be used down the road. The way that I've seen it, I have not seen any clarification that you could get around that. All right. And the final thing is also you must not be receiving workers' compensation benefits for wage loss due to an on-the-job injury. Okay, so those are some big criteria to be able to get the severance pay. We're going to have that whole video because we're building a calculator. It's a little bit complex. It's not too much math. It's just making sure the complex calculations and make sure that you can do it. So we're going to have a whole video on that, help you out a little bit to be able to make these calculations and also show you how these factors work to make sure that that works for you. Okay. Another thing I've gotten a lot of questions about, if you get a RIF, will you be able to get unemployment? And there is unemployment compensation available, but the state governments, including DC, are the ones that determine the eligibility and the amounts. It's not a federal, it's run by Department of Labor, but the states dictate what happens. They're the ones that actually disseminate all of this stuff, again, eligibility and the amounts. We do have a document in the notes section of the unemployment compensation for federal employees, the UCFE. It's a fact sheet. I found it very lacking of any information. It really was useless, basically saying, go call your state and figure out what's there. There is some links to a couple of documents there. So we did include it, but for me, it really wasn't too much information. It basically says, go call your state because we're not going to tell you anything. So there is unemployment available, but it's through states. The next big thing, and this is where I want your help from, if you could help us out a little bit, let us know if you want us to do a whole video on this because we will. It's the reemployment programs, all right? If you want to come back to federal service, there are certain programs that are available. So let's say you were on one of those criteria that you weren't immediately eligible for retirement, and you wanted to get more years of service, or you just really love serving federally, which most people that work for federal government I've found are very passionate about the work that they do. So if this is something that you want to be able to do and you want to be in federal service and you're not very frustrated with what's going on, there's 4 main programs that you can be able to look at and do this. So if you want more information, I will dig into this. I have a lot of information, but we'll get even more of the criteria information, how to apply for them, and those different types of things. But the 4 programs are the Agency Career Transition Assistance Plans, the CTAP. The next one is the Priority Placement Program, PPP, and the Reemployment Priority List, the RPL, and the Interagency Career Transition Assistance Plans, or the ICTAP. Now, some of them are actually the list, the Priority Placement Program and the Reemployment Priority List are actually there so that you as a former federal employee that was involuntarily separated from service, you have a priority in hiring coming back to some of these jobs so you can get to those qualification levels, either as a service or age numbers, to get your retirement at a point that you want to be able to do that. Okay. So that's most of the information here. I just want to reiterate the immediate action items, and I actually added one on from our last video that we did because I did think it was a little bit important and we didn't talk about it. So just another thing to be able to do. But just want to reiterate, get a copy of your entire electronic official personnel folder, the EOPF. Build reserves as fast as you can. Again, I can't say this enough, either between if you're get a RIF or if the government shuts down, you need to have reserves one way or another. So please get this done as soon as possible, just to make sure that you're working on your side versus coming from a hard position and not having the money to pay all the bills. I did add in, change any 2-factor access from government emails. Sometimes people might use a government email for access into a system. I'm not talking about government systems, but just that's what they use to when they were getting into some type of program. Maybe it's an app or something like that you did, and you used a government email for that. If that does happen, it's very rare. Most times people do use a personal one, but if that does happen, you don't want to be locked out of a system because you can no longer get those emails. So that's there. And another thing, just as we're talking about this, I mentioned it briefly, the SF 3107, which is part of the retirement paperwork, but it's also the certification of federal service. I would suggest getting a copy of that so you have a good copy of what your service has been so far, so you have it on your file. Again, in EOPF, it wouldn't necessarily be in there, but you would have a lot of your SF50s in there, but you want to have that because you want to have an up-to-date copy of that you know what's going on when you leave service. So that's it for today, but again, please put some comments in here. I am reading them. I am trying to get rid of any of that spam that's in there. I know we saw something from the last video about cryptocurrency. We do not do any of that stuff. And so I try to get rid of that stuff that's there. And please, let's try to keep it friendly and supportive of everybody. These are people's lives that we're talking about, and we're trying to help as much as we possibly can. Thank you very much for your time today.